In this video, we are going to look at how to name molecular compounds. Molecular compounds are composed of nonmetal atoms which are bonded together with covalent bonds. So of course we know that nonmetal atoms are those located over on the far right side of our periodic table. So those that we can see here. Molecular compounds share electrons. So a covalent bond is a shared pair of electrons between the atoms, which is very different than a transfer of electrons between two atoms that we see with ionic compounds. So therefore, covalent compounds are composed of neutral nonmetal atoms covalently bonded together. They are not composed of ions. Molecular compounds are often called molecules or sometimes called covalent compounds. The thing about nonmetals is that they can combine at various ratios, unlike ionic compounds, which combine in very fixed ratios. For example, nitrogen and oxygen can form a number of stable compounds. One nitrogen can combine with one oxygen, one nitrogen with two oxygens, two nitrogens with four oxygens. And so we can't determine the ratio that they combine based on charges like we can with ionic compounds because, again, these are neutral atoms. They are not, they haven't gained or lost electrons. So in order to indicate how many of a particular atom we have combined together, or to indicate the ratio that the atoms combine, we use Greek prefixes to tell us how many of each atom we have. In the Greek prefixes, you can see those. Mono is 1, di is 2, tri is 3, etc., etc. So you want to be sure that you are familiar with these Greek prefixes. So we want to be able to do two things. If we're given the chemical formula, we want to be able to give the name of the compound. And then, of course, we want to be able to write the chemical formula when we're given the name. So let's start off by being able to write the name of the compound when we're given the chemical formula. So a couple of things we need to appreciate. The first nonmetal atom is going to be the least electronegative atom, the less electronegative atom, and it's going to get the same name as the element. If there's more than one, we indicate how many there are with a Greek prefix. The second atom is the more electronegative atom, and it gets the same name as the element, but it ends in IDE. And again, we'll indicate how many of that atom we have in the compound by using the appropriate Greek prefix. So let's look at an example. N2F4. We have two nonmetals, or we have two types of nonmetals covalently bonded, so we have a molecular compound. The first atom gets the same name as the element, nitrogen. And you can see we have two of those indicated by the subscript 2, so we would say dinitrogen. The second atom is fluorine, but instead of saying fluorine, we give it the ending IDE. So we say fluoride, and we have four of those indicated by the subscript 4 in our compound. So we say tetrafluoride. Then we simply put those together, dinitrogen, tetrafluoride, and we have our chemical name. There's a couple of other rules that we need to appreciate. I call these kind of grammatical rules. The first one is that if your Greek prefix ends in A or O, like tetra or mono, and the element begins with a vowel, we drop the A or O from the prefix. So that way we don't have two vowels directly adjacent to each other. So an example of that would be N2O4. We would say dinitrogen, but instead of saying tetraoxide, we drop the A from our prefix, so we say tetroxide. So we drop the A so we don't have the A and the O together. So dinitrogen tetroxide. Our second rule is that if the first element, if you only have one of the first element, we don't use the prefix mono. This only applies to the first element. So an example of that would be CO2. Instead of saying monocarbon dioxide, we would simply say carbon dioxide. If we have one of the second element, we do use the prefix mono, though. So let's practice a few of these. Okay? Pause the video, answer these, and then start the video back and see how you did. So our first compound is nitrogen trifluoride. Our second one is dinitrogen monoxide, not monoxide. Here we have carbon monoxide. Again, we don't use the prefix mono if we have one of the first atom, and we drop the O from the mono to have monoxide. ClO4 is chlorine tetroxide. And then our next one is dinitrogen tetroxide. So now let's look at our second case where we're going to be asked to write the chemical formula when we're given the name. And this one's not too bad. We just kind of do the reverse of what we did before. Let's say we had disulfur tetroxide. Well, disulfur, that means we have 2 sulfur atoms in our compound, di for 2, and tetra means 4, so we have tetroxide, so we have 4 oxygen atoms. So here, our compound would be S2O4. Again, we use the subscript 2 and 4 to indicate how many of each atom we have in a chemical formula. So let's practice a few of these and see how you did. So our first compound is xenon hexafluoride, XeF6. Dinitrogen trichloride would be N2Cl3, and phosphorus trichloride would be PCl3. So practice some of these and be sure you're confident naming molecular compounds and recognizing them when you see them.